Okay, so I thought to tell people a little bit about my trip. So, I visited my sister for one day in Southern California and gave a talk to a group of people from a Dharma center. Our friends Prashant and Tenzin arranged the talk. So it was very nice. It was in Prashant's living room, and a lot of people came, and they were really engaged. And then I took this overnight flight to Australia and arrived in Sydney in the morning, not quite sure where I was. And some friends of an old friend of mine from Singapore picked me up at the airport, and I stayed at their house. And then that evening we had a talk there. So it was a lot of people who go to the Aloka Center in Australia. Many of them were, so those people came for the talk, and it was really delightful. It was again in their living room, and what I did, because I wasn't sure what to talk about with them, but what wound up coming out of my mouth was, how His Holiness is always talking about we should be 21st century Buddhists. So I talked about that, kind of what he means by being a 21st century Buddhist. So I'm realizing that I should actually talk more about that to people, because he really mentions it quite a bit, and what does that really mean? So we had a really interesting discussion, and that was a lot of fun. And then the next day they took me, we drove through the Blue Mountains to the place where His Holiness was going to be giving this series of teachings. It was billed as a retreat, but it was actually a series of teachings. But it was limited to just people who had or were taking a highest class Tantra initiation, and trying to keep their vows and commitments and so on. And so I wound up staying at the house of somebody who lives nearby, which again was very, very nice. And then going to the teachings every day. And because it was only a small group of people, only about 600, instead of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people, the Inji Sangha kind of sat in the first row, and so we were really literally at His Holiness's feet. And so that was very inspiring. And His Holiness, he was really glowing. You were there, wasn't he? He was glowing. He really wanted to teach. The initiation usually takes 2 days, but His Holiness, he fitted it in 2 days, but barely, because he taught a lot, just, to prepare people, and then explaining the different parts of the initiation, and just going on and on. It was really very inspiring. And then 3 more days of teachings after that, in which he explained the practice. And so, of course, it was wonderful being near His Holiness. And then I also had the opportunity to see many old friends who were from Australia and New Zealand. We used to be together in India and Kopan, but just as I went back to the US, they went back to their countries too. So I hadn't seen them, some of them, in 25, 30 years. Yeah. And so it was amazing to, these people would come up to me and say, "Oh, hello, children." And I'm like, and I just said, "I'm sorry, I don't recognize you." And then they would tell me who they are. And then I would like, "Oh, yeah." But, many people after 30 years don't look the way they looked when we were in our 20s, because we're now in our 50s and 60s, so we don't look the same. And then some people are like 20 or 30 pounds heavier, so they look really different. So that was really shocking, but it was also very nice to catch up with these people and see so many of them still, very much in the Dharma. Some of them had at one time or another been monastics and disrobed, but still, their hearts and minds in the Dharma. So that was really very, very nice. And then after that, I went back into Sydney, and I gave 2 talks, one at the university and one at a group of engaged Buddhists, which was also very fun. We had a good time. Then, because I only had 1 day in Sydney, and then flew to Medan, Indonesia. It's on the island of Sumatra, which is the same island where Atisha met his guru, Serlingpa. It wasn't near that site. I would actually like to go to that site and do a full pilgrimage of the Buddhist sites in Indonesia. We often don't think of Indonesia as being a Buddhist country, but it isn't a Buddhist country now, but it definitely, the Hinduism and Buddhism that formed the early great empires still form a lot of the feeling and culture there, even though Islam is now the predominant religion. So in Medan, we had really very nice people caring for us. I kept telling them that they were going to make Venerable Somten and me into spoiled brats when we returned to the Abbey, because they took such good care of us. And we did a retreat out in the countryside, apparently driving on the road where just a few days ago this Hercules helicopter crashed. But it was an incredible drive through this very lush tropical jungle, to get to the retreat center, which was located on the main road, so you felt like you were on a highway. Yeah, it was quite kind of stark contrast. But the retreat went quite well, and then we came back into the city, and for 2 nights I gave talks at one of the large temples there. And lots of people came. In fact, the second night when I talked about an open-hearted life, the volunteers were great. They kept on having to drag out extra chairs, more and more and more. And we figured, 350, 400 people were there. Yeah, at least that many. So, very well received. And then flew to Jakarta and went out to the countryside to another retreat center, and got eaten by mosquitoes, completely eaten by mosquitoes, after they said there were no mosquitoes. But I guess they liked us. Yeah. And did a retreat on Buddhism, one teacher, many traditions. But I focused, because in Buddhism, in Indonesia, Buddhism is just kind of getting going again after many years of being rather dormant. And so people have all sorts of teachers coming, and they get a little bit of teaching here and a little there. It's hard for them to put it into a systematic path. So I spent the first day explaining the 3 levels of capacity of beings according to the Lamrim. And, in order to kind of help them see where different topics fit in the path to awakening, so that they wouldn't get so confused. And then we went into the topic of the 4 immeasurables. Okay, so that was another 3-day retreat, then came back into Jakarta, and that evening gave a talk at the Ekayana Center. And so this group, or this network that organize the talks in both Medan and Jakarta. They're called Buddhayana, the Buddha's vehicle. And I really like their approach. They're very inclusive. So they have monastics from all the different traditions. They have teachings from all the traditions. People seem to get on very well together, which is really heartening, and inspiring. Then from Jakarta, Venerable Samten came home, and I flew to Yogyakarta, and then again drove out into the countryside to this resort where they had a conference of Sakyadhita. Sakyadhita is an organization of Buddhist women that was begun in 1987. And I went to that very first conference, and then this one, which was 28 years later or something. It was the 14th conference. They have them every 2 years. And the conference was wonderful. I really hope next time they have it in another 2 years that more people from the Abbey can go, because its objective is very much education, education about the Dharma, about the situation of Buddhist women internationally. And so there were women there from all sorts of countries. The first day at the opening ceremony, the monastics came in, and the robes, so many different kinds of robes, because there were nuns from Burma, there were Maichis from Thailand, there were some from Cambodia, and Theravada practitioners from Vietnam, Mahayana practitioners from Vietnam, Sri Lankans, people from mainland China, from Taiwan, from Korea. Japanese Buddhism was represented, Tibetans, there was a group of nuns from Bhutan. There were really, and then European countries and North American countries. And there are people from all over the place, and some men came as well. And so the day was very full. I don't think they expected everybody to follow everything that was available, because otherwise there was hardly any time to breathe. But there was meditation in the morning, and then we had plenary sessions, which were usually they had 5 different people present their papers, and they published a book with all the papers in it, which I couldn't carry back, but they're going to send to me. And what I'm thinking of doing is, when they send it, maybe reading some of the papers, and in the BBC's summarizing them, so that you can know some of what people said. Because the topics, we started talking about Buddhism in Indonesia, because that was the host country. Sakyadhita has conferences in different countries each year. This year it happened to be in Indonesia. So it ranged from that to talking about the restoration of the bhikkhuni ordination in the Theravada countries, to talking about, Buddhism and feminism, and Buddhism and social activism. And it was really quite full, and really good papers, very interesting topics. And the Q&A sessions that came after that were I thought the most interesting. So there was a plenary session in the morning, and then we had lunch, and then another plenary session in the afternoon. That was followed by breakout groups, which were, workshops, individual workshops, that again covered a wide variety of topics, but in small groups. Then there was chanting. Each evening, a different tradition chanted. Then there was an evening presentation. Sometimes it was a Dharma talk. So, and sometimes it was a cultural presentation. So the evening plenary Dharma talks, the first one was by Achan Brahm, and then Venerable Tenzin Palmo gave one, and then I gave one. And then the cultural presentations I skipped, because it was a little bit too loud for me, but many people enjoyed those, because they were the Indonesian, native dances and music and drama and so forth. But the conference really gave us an opportunity to meet with many people that normally we wouldn't meet. Yeah, because we live in different countries, speak different languages. But here, with people coming together, it was the atmosphere. This is what really impressed me, because I'm not a big fan of conferences. I tend not to go to them. But this one, the atmosphere was really of people, everybody encouraging other people. Everybody encouraging each other. There was not a competitive spirit. The questions were not derogatory or trying to show off one's own intelligence, but people really supporting each other. And what I found very interesting was two of the academics, university professors that I talked to, said that academia is like so competitive, and that they were coming to this conference because it wasn't competitive, and that there was some element of ethical conduct and, mutual reinforcement and kindness in this kind of conference. And I really saw that, and so I stayed until the day before the end of the conference. I missed the last day, which was mostly meetings. And then they did a 2-day temple tour, which included getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to Borobudur. So I think they are just, if I have my days right, they're just finishing that now. Okay. But quite wonderful, and I hope to share more of the papers with you. Yeah, and then and then took some very long plane rides, and got back here yesterday. So it was a wonderful trip, and I was also very happy to come home. So.